Does anybody else imagine living in America where press equally covers all of our leaders, both sides of the aisle? I certainly do, and I'm sure many do. Unfortunately, anymore, that's not the case with our great nation. These days, you have a man who can barely speak a straight, fluent sentence without stumbling or slipping or mispronouncing a word, just like in one of his last virtual press briefings, where he literally had a word slip and said the N word. Could you imagine? Could you imagine if Donald Trump had done such a thing? The media would go nuts. What does the media do when Joe Biden does it? Absolutely nothing. Complete silence from the left side of the aisle. But the only place you find coverage is from conservative networks. Now, obviously, no one's going to bash him for this. He slips up on a lot of things, and it's clearly a word slip, or at least I would hope so. I think many would hope so, but it wouldn't be that big of a surprise if it was intentional, considering our commander in chief's blatant racist history, even though, he's the wokest president we have. He stands for minorities. That load of bull crap that the left constantly pushes, which is not true. We've all seen the videos, or most of us have. But anyway, virtual press briefing. Joe Biden slip of the tongue. I guess you could word it, but the slip of the tongue happens to be the N word, a very offensive word for the black community, with good reason, of course. Uh, but the main issue is Joe Biden can say something like that, and the media will ignore it. The media is set up now to protect Joe, to cover up as much of the bad as they possibly can. The media will only target a Democrat if that Democrat is no longer of use to the Democratic Party. A good example is the governor of New York. He is no longer considered useful to the Democratic Party, as Ben Shapiro stated. And now he is basically thrown to the wolves. They will now report badly on him. They will call for investigations, which they are. Both sides are. Uh, Obviously, the conservative side would do that either way, but to our not surprise now, the Democrats are also doing it. Again, because he is no longer of use to them. He is kind of a scapegoat, especially for de Blasio, uh, because he's going to use this to hide behind Cuomo. As long as Cuomo is under fire, uh, de Blasio is fine, even though he's still being called out by conservative networks. He definitely would not be by Democratic networks. He's using this as a perfect way to stay in the shadows. He's possibly the worst mayor that has ever been. And he is going to use this to stay covered for the blunders that he made. Because keep in mind, it was not just the governor. De Blasio made plenty of big mistakes, especially during the pandemic. But those haven't really been addressed, and they definitely won't now, while the main fire is on people like Cuomo or Senator Ted Cruz. Uh, he took a trip to Cancun and is now under heavy fire, especially from the left. Obviously, the right is going to defend him. There's basically no change. Left attacks him because they hate him. Right defends him because they like him. Uh, was going to Cancun a good choice, especially during this time? No, but he returned and was helping out down in Texas. He was seen handing out water bottles. Uh, Obviously, this could play or have big part to do with being called out on his trip to Cancun. But let's keep in mind, while that's not much, handing out water bottles and stuff, what has the commander in chief done? Pretty much nothing. He has barely even mentioned the uh, crisis, if at all. Very, very limited. And could you imagine if Trump had done something like this? Could you imagine if Trump had pulled the things that Biden is doing? Biden has almost ignored the crisis. Now, whether or not the electric grid, collapsing, anything has to do with solar power, wind power, uh, not a big deal. We're not going to really get into that. But the point is, if Trump had gone about how Biden is going about and not said a word about it, or if anything about it, very little, the media would go insane. They would be on his tail like you could not believe. And in some aspects, they still are. The man hasn't been president in a month, and they still report on him more than they do Biden. And anything Biden does that is remotely wrong, if they report on it, they say, basically, well, at least he's not Donald Trump, uh, which is absolutely disgraceful. This is what we've come to. Uh, Even when Joe blatantly lies, saying things like, we didn't have the vaccine under the last administration, when there are two photos of him, more photos of that, but there's two instances where he himself actually got the actual vaccine under President Trump's administration. And he even was one of the people, including others like Chris Wallace. They all said we will definitely not have this vaccine under Trump. Even Trump's advisors supposedly said this. If any of you, I'm sure most, have seen the presidential debate, Chris Wallace was shocked when President Trump said we would have our vaccine. And we did under Trump. Uh, so Chris Wallace, Joe Biden, wrong. And of course, they tried to politicize it. Trump didn't give us the vaccine, but Biden did. Biden even said Trump didn't order enough vaccines, get it rolled out fast enough. Trump he got this vaccine out under Operation Warp Speed faster than any other vaccine. Fastest one we've ever seen. And he did, with the cards he was dealt, he did a pretty good job about it. Maybe his distribution wasn't perfect, but it was better than, honestly, probably now. Uh, Joe hasn't done much. He campaigned on the promise that he has a plan for COVID, when in fact, everything he has done is basically what Trump has done in regards to the vaccine and the virus itself. But other than that, Joe has done nothing but eliminate jobs, hurt our economy, raise gas and oil prices with the swipe of a pen. And at the same time, I think we all remember the Democratic media, probably Joe himself in some instances, referring to Trump as a dictator or authoritarian. Uh, Joe has done just about nothing but bypass our legislative branch of government. If anybody has led so far dictatorial in any way, authoritarian in any way, that person would be Joe Biden. Uh, and the barriers and the fence around the Capitol is absolutely disgraceful. Uh, but and they're going to be there. Our National Guardsmen, these barriers are going to be there for at least another month, according to Nancy Pelosi. But other than that, Joe has done nothing but hurt our country. He has basically opened our borders to allow immigrants in, granting them asylum. He even wants to give them citizenship. So Joe has completely stepped away from this America First agenda and stepped to an America Last agenda, even going as far as sending money to the lab in Wuhan where COVID-19 originated. For those of you who don't know, That is exactly what he did. And that is one of the most outrageous things I think most Americans can hear. And I think a lot of people are realizing that, whoops, I think we may have made at least a little bit of a mistake electing Joe, because he's done nothing but put our country last and hurt us. But with the media on his side, they portray him as nothing but good, and anything that could be considered bad or used as ammunition against Joe is written off or not shown or reported on. And then when conservative outlets talk about it, it's marked as fake news or uh, misinformation. That's a new term that the left is using to attack, especially right wing networks and podcasts and shows, is they're spreading misinformation. We need to silence them. This couldn't have been more clear when, say, Amazon would not allow Parler to use their web services. And several Democratic networks, I think New York Times or CNN, I think it was New York Times, but or maybe it was NBC. I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head, but it was one of the three more major Democratic news networks. But they called for Fox News, especially because Fox News is more diverse and reports more realistically. Even though it is seen as a hard right wing network, they actually are reporting the truth. They are willing to criticize leaders on both sides of the board. But Democratic media calls for the cancel of groups like Fox News, and even publicly called for Fox News to be shut down because they disagree with them. And they mark that as spreading misinformation. And this is dangerous. This is absolutely dangerous, because what they're going to do now is cover Joe Biden and other leaders like Kamala Harris, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi's ass by uh, only reporting the good things or twisting things to look good. And anybody that disagrees with them is spreading false information or are white supremacists or whatever they want to mark you as. That is exactly what they are going to do. This is a direct attack on our freedom of speech. That is exactly what is going to happen. And they are using uh, the attack on the Capitol as a lot of ammunition as well. They still do, uh, because they want to uh, depict it as, look, conservatives, Trump supporters, people that like Trump, they're all responsible. They all played a part in this. All Republican members of Congress, the House and Senate, anybody that voted for Trump, all 70 million plus voters for Trump, are completely okay with this attack. They all supported this. This is all their fault. They had to see this coming when they elected Donald Trump. And that is exactly what they're doing. They're using it as ammunition. So they say, look at these insurrectionists. They tried to overthrow our democracy and spread false information. They're using this as a way to silence opposition. If you disagree with them, you are spreading false information, and you are okay with the attack on the Capitol, that sort of thing. And it's sad. It's very sad. They are going to continue to do this. This is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. Now, I think from the looks of it, in 2 years, the Republicans might be able to take back some power in Congress. Maybe more seats in the House, quite possibly the Senate. That's how it looks. So hopefully it goes that way, because as of right now, the Democrats can pretty much just plow anything they want straight through Congress and pass just about anything they want. They have the majority, and they are going to use this. They're going to use this for as long as they can, and try their best to silence opposition and cover pushover Joe, because that is just what our media does.